Allie, I'm so happy to have you on the show. It sounds like you've been a longtime listener of this and like the prior version, 8 Minute Millionaire, that Justin and Tara began. So, how fun to have it come full circle. We were just making this connection. We've kind of known some of the same areas. I've lived in San Clemente, which is how I met Justin and Tara. You have family that's lived there. Welcome to the podcast. Let's just jump right into that.
I am so happy to be here. I have just loved and treasured so many episodes. There's like notes from them, and it's exciting. It's exciting to be here and get to give back from what I've gotten from this show too.
I love that. I would love to have more listeners like that. And I know it'll just take time. I know we've had
Yeah.
that OG group of listeners that maybe did listen to 8 Minute Millionaire back in the day that have gone on and done things. I know I'm one of them. And it's cool to have another, I don't want to say graduate, but kind of a graduate of the content coming
Yeah.
back. And it's just fun to see these principles work. And the people that we
hmm
have on really do provide incredible value. So it's fun that now you're on the other end of this and getting to provide that value. So thanks for
Yes.
coming to spend some time with me today.
Oh, it's gonna be good. There's so much
Yeah,
goodness to talk about.
I know, 100%. Okay, so why don't you give us a little rundown of your entrepreneurship? I never know where to have people start. Like you can start back in the lemonade stand when you're, 5 years old if you want, but where did you kind of get your first taste of entrepreneurship and then take us up to currently what you're doing right now?
Well, I had the gift and pleasure of having parents and grandparents who are entrepreneurs. So that there was already a piece of my blood that was just always going to go that way. We that obstinance and desire for freedom was always going to be a part of who I was. Did the babysitter club thing when I was a kid. I mean, always running something. But I actually in high school, I ended up having an opportunity to travel as a singer. And I took it, and the only way I could do that was to start homeschooling, which
Mm.
terrified my family, completely terrified them. And they even went to the neighborhood school, got those books, and they're like, okay, you're going right back in. But it was really transformative. And so I ended up getting multiple teaching credentials, going into the school system. And I'm like, I'm going to take that, that same entrepreneur mindset. We can innovate. We can make this better. We can, grow and improve, and brought all of those things in, even worked up to leadership, taught everywhere, and realized that the system really works the way it's intended to work. And
Unfortunately.
so unfortunately, I do think there's a lot of really exciting things happening now, but I shifted gears and I started working exclusively with families. I'm working directly with them because when parents are empowered and have the knowledge they need, they can change the world. Like if we can get them on solid ground, I mean, it's incredible what we can see. So I built my first six-figure business coaching and supporting families. And that was such a gift, such a pleasure. I coached over 1,000 families worldwide. I got to work with people from all over the place, and still keep in touch with so many of my clients. Such an honor. And then the world changed, right? Things were shifting really fast in COVID era. And, I looked around and there was an opportunity that presented itself because we had a lot of children who stopped having access to what they needed access to during that time in regards to education. And an opportunity opened up for me to start a learning center or homeschool hybrid. And from idea, that happened in July. The idea and the location happened in July. I opened it in October with 36 kids. By January, I had a wait list of over 200. And then
Whoa.
it just went from there. So over the course of the 3 years that I spent building, I actually exited recently. It was such a gift, and they're doing great. The systems that we've got in place, they're all doing really well. But we grew, we served well over 300 families at a time, multi seven figure business, and really becoming a staple in the community. So it was such an honor and such a privilege to be able to do that. But as I was doing that, other programs started reaching out and they're like, wait, what can we do? What can we do? And my desire has always been, from back when I got my credentials, has always been to support families and really give them the best education possible. So now I'm shifting to helping people get these programs started because I really believe this is the next frontier of education. This is what we need. It's almost like a shift back to the one room schoolhouse in that we
Mm.
have localized control. We're personalizing education, making it make sense for the families and the communities that need them. And so now my mission is to take all of this stuff and really get as many opportunities available as possible, and let entrepreneurs who want to make this kind of level of impact give them a pathway to do that because we need you. We need the education entrepreneurs desperately right now.
Hmm. I was curious going into this conversation how I would feel by the end. So this will be really interesting because, I'm very easily drawn to entrepreneurial options. I've taught myself there's options and there's opportunities. There's so many options. It's only an opportunity if it aligns with your vision and your values, right?
Too. Hmm.
And I've honestly said that to where I'm like, my kids right now, I told you they homeschool. We homeschool for 5 years. I recently put them into this kind of a thing where it's like this is a program that really just takes what I've done in homeschool, and it's a smaller, very, very small private school, but it's pretty much same as what you're telling us that you've done. And I've been like, man, bless the women who are willing to do that and the people who've come together because I just don't want to. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm like, but I only don't want to because I'm trying to like live in both worlds right now, and I've been
Mm.
trying to live in both worlds for 5 years. And so it's not even that I don't love teaching my children. I think it's just been really difficult to manage both. And so it's great that there's that option because I just can't get on board with public school. This whole podcast is
Hmm.
about following a different path than just the standard education. And for most people listening, that's choosing something instead of college. Even for
Yeah.
me, once I became a full-blown entrepreneur, I was like, "What are we doing? We're sending these kids to punch time clocks just to pass the time, and they're not really coming out
Yep.
learning." And, I see my kids and I worry they're behind, and then I see their public school friends and I'm like, "They're not behind. They're actually a little bit ahead, even though we're doing
Yeah.
very, very bare minimum education." Anyway, so that was just a whole tangent, but I really think it's amazing what you've done, and I wanna dig all into that whole story. I know we skimmed over it, but there's so many good things in there. But yeah, I was like, "What's gonna happen by the end of this? Am I gonna be starting one of these local learning
Well,
centers you're
hey,
talking
I'll help
about?"
you. I'll help you. We'll get it going. I think you highlight some really important points though. And the one thing I want to make abundantly clear, I know we have built a culture over the last 6 generations that completely is immersed and built and supported and propped up by this idea of school and neighborhood schools. And so for a lot of people, talking about this kind of ruffles feathers just on initial view. And I do want to say, I have 3 teaching credentials. I have taught in public, I've taught in private, I've taught charters, I've taught and the teachers who are leaving to do this are doing a great job, but the teachers who are in there, they are wonderful. They can do great things, but there is
Mhm.
just the nature of being an institution. There's
Yeah.
the nature of being one human to 30 and sometimes 40 other little humans
Yeah.
that requires a system that doesn't acknowledge the personal piece. So I think there's kind of this duality we have to live in of like, yes, this has been a part of culture for a really long time, and it's hard to consider looking another way or trying something different. Um, but as well as just the nature of the system was never going to allow for the level of personalization that we are all realizing matters when it comes to education now.
Yeah.
So I think, and what you're saying about homeschooling, kind of having to live in both worlds and trying to find balance and rest. I love homeschooling. I'm a huge proponent of homeschooling, advocate. I joke that my kids have grown up at the Capitol here in California, like really involved. But I also know that homeschooling is it really isn't sitting at home with your kids and being their educator either. It's really about a parent taking ownership of their child's education and putting themselves in that driver's seat and making those decisions. So if that means come across a teacher that's not the right fit, you are able to make that change. And I think we've got to kind of broaden our idea here around that. It's really that ownership. And so for a lot of families, that means finding these in between places, these hybrids that
Mhm.
come along and partner with you. There's so much goodness in what you're talking about. I think what you have gone back and forth with is what a lot of families are dealing with right now too. They know public school is not the right fit. A lot of private schools now mimic public school in ways. I'm so glad it sounds like you found an absolute treasure, which
Yeah.
I love. But it can be really challenging that there are not a lot of options for other families. And so they feel very stuck. And I think that's the problem we have to start working on solving.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so true. I think anytime you feel like there's a one size fits all, it's probably false because we're not created that way. And I love that
Exactly.
there's a little bit more awareness of this. I'm hearing more and more, and I was kind of wondering if I should go into this space. And for a minute, I did play around with it. And I think there's still room there where I feel like there's a subset of an audience of homeschoolers. I realized I was by no means an expert, but I was years ahead of those who this huge wave, right? Like you said, our world has changed. More and more people are coming into that space. And I've wondered, like, should I show up there? Should I be providing this kind of education to homeschoolers? Because it's really hard to break out of the paradigm and to look at things differently and not have the fear that what if they don't level up in this way, or what if they don't meet these different guidelines? And I don't know, for me it's like, even if you question what I was saying before, you question the workforce and the system that kind of puts us through 9 to 5 jobs, and you see a lot of those same patterns that are mimicked with traditional education, and you see like we're not happier a couple hundred years later, like, right?
Accurate. In fact, you could argue the opposite.
Yeah, you could. You very much could. And you'd win the argument because it's pretty
Hmm.
evident. But I love that you're creating this and that you're taking it to the masses as well. But I want to rewind a little bit because
Yeah.
even as you were talking about your history and your timeline, you said I coached over 1,000 families and then the world changed. And I'm like, it would make sense that you had coached a lot of homeschool families after the pandemic. But what was that like in building a business? Like, where did you discover okay, I have something here and I could actually benefit other people. And I'm genuinely curious for myself too. I felt like, was it because you were coaching everybody in the same curriculum? What did that look like and how did you tap
Oh
into that
no.
problem or that need?
Yeah, never. I think that's one of the things that always set me apart. There's a lot of people out there who are happy to teach you how they homeschool, which I think is fabulous. That's great. But
Right.
the entire purpose and nature behind homeschooling is that you're creating something that is personalized and fits your family values, your personalities that you have in your family, the needs, the strengths, things like that. So no, the way this actually started for me, we have something in California called an ISP charter, which is an independent study program charter, where families are public school students, but they are basically operating day to day as homeschoolers with a teacher who oversees them in the public school every month or so they meet. And there's been drastic changes in this field in recent years. But right before I shifted from being in a public school environment to running my own business, that was the position I had gone into. So I was a director of career and technical education for that program. And then I had this group of families that I was helping through the process. So I already had been homeschooled for the end of high school, had worked around and with homeschoolers and independent study kids for years. I am personally a complete curriculum geek and love curriculum, love learning about learning and neuroscience and how our brains work. Just one of those people that nerds out on that stuff. And I'd been serving these families through the public school, through the charter. And as regulation got more and more involved in that process, I realized that I couldn't serve my families the way that I wanted to serve them, the way they needed to be served, and the way I had been serving them. And I got to this point where there was one kiddo, one family, where there was a situation that arose, and I'm like, this is what this kid needs. This ability. This kiddo was already taking community college classes like in junior high, and was doing really well, and had an entrepreneurial spirit. We had built things around them, and they wanted to, because of regulation, roll him back into a box where he was going to have to check off biology, check off this, check off that, check off this. And, he was on his way to like an astrophysicist type level of things. And they were telling me I had to roll it back. I had to. So I was taking his stuff and patchworking it in. And they stopped me and I was like, and you know what? I love all my teacher friends who still do that job. I think it's a wonderful thing that we offer, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. In my own conscience, I'm looking at this kid and I said to the mom, I was like, you've got to go private homeschooling. You got to stop. You got to step out of this. This is not going to serve him well. And I looked at my other kids, and I can even get emotional about it. But at the time, I looked at my other kids and I was like, none of these kids are going to be served as well because of these regulations. And I'm like, these parents just need the tools. They just need the support. They need to know. They need to, you have ed code and you have requirements for diplomas and you have requirements for this and that. And it is designed to be imposing. It is designed to make you feel inadequate. And I mean, we could have a whole conversation about that, but I realized I was like, I can't do this to them. I won't. So I'm like, I'm going to go directly to these parents and I'm going to serve them as well as I possibly can so that they feel strong enough, empowered enough to serve their own children the way they deeply desire to.
Mm.
So that's what I started doing. Then COVID happened, and then I was helping even more people at that point.
Wow.
And it actually wasn't until about year and a half into COVID when so many kids had just, because then it was like, oh no, it's going to be a long time before these kids have access to school again. And there was so much happening, and these families were just, I I used to kind of semi joke that we were, when I was building it with my team, I'm like, you guys, we're building lighthouses and lifeboats. Go grab them. Come on, that's what we're doing. Lighthouses and lifeboats. Like we are going to help. We're getting these people. We're gonna go grab them. We're gonna give them a place. And that's what we did. Brick by brick as we were doing it, right? We built
Yeah.
it. But that's the timeline. It's been, regulation across the United States and even in other countries has become more and more prevalent over time. And we only even won the right back in the United States to homeschool at like all 50 states in the 90s. It
What?
used to be, this is something that a lot of people don't recognize. So homeschooling, the founding fathers of the United States, that they were pretty much all homeschooled. They had tutors, they had community schools, but like they were taught to read at home. They were taught basic arithmetic at home. Our literacy rates also much higher. So it wasn't until the invention of the common school or public schools that happened in the mid late 1800s that homeschooling, they created those and people weren't going.
Mm.
They created these schools, right? Horace Mann's like, hey, we've got these Prussian schools, come send your kids. And they didn't want to. And over time, they created the compulsory schooling laws. And yes, you can look back and you can find people kind of pushing against it, but I don't think they really realized that the creation of the compulsory schooling law, where they mandated that you go to these places, was going to at the same moment make homeschooling illegal. But that's what happened. And then you see almost immediately after, you start seeing lawsuits of families fighting tooth and nail to keep their children with them or have the ability to own their children's education, right? To have that ownership. And it took until the 1990s. So from the mid 1800s to the 1990s for us to fight to get the right back to homeschool in all 50 states. So
I'm
a lot of
mind
this,
blown.
so the funny thing is, people think that homeschooling's the experiment. It's not the experiment. Homeschooling is what we are founded on, right? Like homeschooling or one room schoolhouse, that localized control, family centric education is what we're founded on. Then they took it away without people realizing that's what was about to happen. And it took us all that time to fight to get it back. So this idea that homeschoolers are weird, that it's separate, it's secondary, was the byproduct of losing a right without people recognizing it?
Wow. I love the parallelism with this. Like, I love, there's two angles I want to just keep diving into, which is your perspective as an entrepreneur who found this problem and really attacked that. And then also, I just have to draw attention to the parallels of, we do joke like homeschool's not the experiment. Well, also, if you look at like the development of the 9 to 5 blue collar jobs, white collar jobs, whatever,
Yep.
like those are
Industrial era.
also, yeah, industrial area. That's a total experiment too, and it's not going well either. Like
No,
we are the most unhappy that we've
it's
ever been, and
not.
we've
Unhappy and
ruined.
unhealthy.
Yes, unhappy, unhealthy. We are not honoring our bodies. So I feel like we're on the same tangent. And I guess this is why, even for me, the two went hand in hand. Like full blown entrepreneurship and homeschool just made sense. And it also can become challenging. And so I love that you have created a space where you were able to nurture and see a problem that you could really see being in the career path that you were. I mean, lots of people could see it, but you had a really unique take on it to see and have firsthand experience with like, this is not the ideal option. So for the ideal option to happen, I need to do something. And I think that right there is the essence of entrepreneurship, like really good, solid entrepreneurship. There's nothing wrong with wanting to build something because you just need extra income. But I honestly feel like the most sustainable businesses are found in solving a problem and really loving, like having a purpose and a reason behind that solving. So it sounds like there's no wonder that you've built this incredibly successful business out of that. And I love the lighthouses and lifeboats analogy because it's so true. It's what it felt like for me as a homeschool mom. Like,
Yeah.
send me the lifeboat, send me the lighthouse. I can keep
You're like,
going.
I'm drowning out
I'm
here. I'm
drowning and
drowning.
it's dark and it's hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's an incredible parallel when you connect those two together because it's all connected, right? They all go hand
Yeah.
in hand that and it comes back to that like we need to be intentional and awake and aware of what we're doing. And building a business, it feels like the unconventional thing, but it's so funny because when you said this nation was founded by people who were homeschooled, it was also founded by entrepreneurs. It was founded by
Yep.
the American dream is rooted in
Absolutely.
entrepreneurship, and yet we're all just like, that's weird.
Multi-passionate entrepreneurs. I love that we study biographies. I think are just so helpful and so important. And not only were they entrepreneurs, not only were they homeschooled, they were bibliophiles, they were explorers, they were like there were every single one of them was multi-passionate. And I think there's such an opportunity right now because people are becoming more aware. One of the I even hesitate to say this, but one of the upsides of all of the difficult part of COVID is that people became aware of what was happening in
Mhm.
the schools, what was happening. There was a level of transparency they hadn't experienced before. And I think for a lot of families, it made them go, wait a minute, I need more transparency. I want something different. And it kind of opened their eyes to be able to articulate what it is that they even wanted.
Yeah.
Because school kind of has been this nebulous idea of like, we send our kids and they are educated. But there's a lot of stuff in between there. And what does that education actually mean? What other things is it entailing aside from reading, writing, and arithmetic? What's going on there? I think people becoming more aware and realizing, like, wait, this doesn't actually align with the life I want for my children,
Yeah.
the way I want them to live and lead in the world, and start looking and articulating what it is that they do want. I think that's what's creating this space
Yeah.
because it used to be you either opted into the program or you opted all the way out,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And I think we're recognizing that like I'm all about the and. Let's go with the
Amen.
and. I'm an entrepreneur. I want the and life. I want this and I want that and I want that.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to be burnt out. I want to enjoy my life. I want to enjoy my motherhood. I want to enjoy my children. And I think that's where a lot of us are at right now. It's like, okay, we've recognized this problem.
Yep.
We see that. We have an articulated vision. Now, how in the construct of our current world and culture, how do we make this happen? How do we move forward? And
Mhm.
that's where I think this comes in and solves the problem. That's where micro schools, homeschool hybrids, learning centers, online learning really tried. And I think that there will always be a place for it. But part of that awareness, that transparency was realizing that, like you said, right now we're living in a world where most people are unhappy and unhealthy, unfortunately. That online learning has a place, but as the end all be all, it's really not meeting the mark of what parents are looking for and what they want.
Yep.
So we gotta look at it differently. It's time to shake the bottle. I always say I'm the like a bottle jar of ants. I'm always the one shaking the jar. I'm like, come on, we're gonna do something different.
We're
We're doing
shaking
something
life
different.
up.
Yes,
I love that.
but they
Yeah.
like it on the other side.
I know. It's you just trust the process. It's going to be fine.
Yes, yes.
Well, no, I love that I have such a testimony of this because I think this is you just basically articulated what the last several years have looked like for me as a mother and this waking up and my awakening happened before COVID, not to make it sound so philosophical and important, but I honestly think it's just
It's your family. It is that important.
yeah, it is. It is very important and you just I started realizing like I'm not even parenting on purpose. Like I'm just kind of doing what my parents did and I didn't really cast vision for what I wanted for our family for their education. Like you said, it was this nebulous thing. You just send your kids to school because that's what you do. They turn 5, you send them to kindergarten. And I think it was possibly even in moving and going to different schools in different states and being like, oh, this is what is considered a good education is high test scores and a little bit of my trauma from elementary school came in
Oh
where I was
yeah.
like, "Oh, no, I don't wanna be graded on that." Like, I had a terrible experience in so many ways, and, but for me, it has been finding, like, there's an alternative when you create the vision, and I think this I talk
Hmm.
about this a lot on this show and on everywhere I can, and I love that you tapped into that, like, when you start with that, then the how can present itself, and
Yep.
so, I love that you're continuing to push this movement forward because we have lived far too long without options where it has
Hmm.
been this or that, and I love that you are bringing more so there can be an there was something else I was gonna say. I could talk to you for hours. This is, like, such a fun conversation for me. You're so smart. I
Yeah.
love talking to smart
Oh
people who know
goodness.
what they're doing. It's really enjoyable. It's one of the perks of this job, this position that I get to sit in here. But I wanna talk a little bit about, like, some of the nitty-gritty too, because I think there's so many
Hmm.
things we can touch on. But what has
Yeah.
that looked like? So you had the coaching. I assume maybe you were able to serve so many people, probably not on one-on-one. You had membership maybe, and then
I had course that was when courses were still
oh, yeah, yeah.
flying, right?
The course gravy
So,
train, yep.
yes, the course gravy train. So I had courses, I did group coaching programs, and I did one-on-ones. I also did a lot of Voxer. So we would do, 1 month upfront where we would really get in there and one of the foundational things I do with all my families is a family mission statement, setting a very clear mission and vision. I think, I was in a group and we were reading a leadership book. And I remember it was a group of moms, and we came together to discuss the book. And I remember a mom saying, I don't know why we did this. This doesn't apply to what I do. I'm just a mom. And I remember like I like physically like sat up because I'm like, wait a minute. And we do the same thing with business. Like business and leadership, we approach those with this idea of like, yes, we're going to have a clear vision, we're going to have a plan of action, we're going to be intentional, we're going to go back and review and make sure we're, 80/20, that we're using all the principles. And then with our families, we really kind of allow them to grow into whatever they grow into, and then we just get pulled by the weight of it and whatever is happening around it. And then we feel unfulfilled, disconnected. Our kids aren't doing the things we thought they would or how it would work. You feel worn down by parenthood. It's like a mess. But when we approach it, and I'm not saying your kids are a business, but when you approach it with the same level of intentionality that you will approach a business, you're going to see those gains. You're going to be able to, when I do my quarterly updates for my business, I'm also checking in on our goals as a family. We're checking out, my kids are setting goals. We're looking at like, hey, did we finish those books together? Did we get outside? Whatever it is that we're trying to be intentional about, we're approaching it with the same level of intentionality. And
Yeah.
I think that in and of itself solves so many problems in
Oh, yeah.
families because we're living in our own heads and in our own places. And, then you come into your child's world for a minute because you've been doing your miracle morning and they've been hanging out on the couch, right? And you come in with your miracle morning energy and they're on the couch and you're like, okay, let's go. Can you imagine being like full on vacation mode and having a miracle morning person come into your space?
I
Like it creates
cannot.
so much, but it creates so much friction within families. And
Yeah.
this goes in so many different capacities. So when I was working with families, we had to create a very clear mission, vision, family mission statement that you discuss together. We have it up in our house. We all know it. We all know it. And we've gone through 2 revisions. We've changed as a family over time. But, I would help them with that. We get a good idea. And then we do things like Boxer coaching for accountability throughout. So I was able to expand my capacity as much as possible. But I do homeschool my 3 kids. So you can imagine my capacity maxed out
Yeah.
somewhere along the way there.
My gosh. I feel so seen. That moment when it's like, you have hidden cameras in my house, my poor children. I was exposed to Miracle Morning, bless its soul. It's a great book. It's a
Oh, love
great
it.
thing,
Yes,
right? We love it.
absolutely.
We love our
Absolutely.
Miracle Mornings. And
Yes.
it just cracks me up because it's so true. Like my children are just living their lives. And I've had to learn this as a mom that like I think you go out of toddler years when you literally have to do everything for everyone. And now that I'm
Yep.
gaining more independent teenagers, I'm like, yeah, I'm totally the Miracle Morning mom who's coming in and being like, this is how we're going to function. And they're like, I'm so over this. I'm so over my like coach of a mom who's trying to like life coach me through life instead of just being my mom and letting me live. But oh my gosh, I read that book and I remember when I was exposed to them because I think Justin and Tara had Hal Elrod on 8 Minute Millionaire back in the day. And that's how I learned about it. And I would set that alarm for like 4:30 so it could be early enough. And we were just teasing my
Yep.
15-year-old the other day. I'm like, and you would wake up at 4. And it was a
Yep.
nightmare. And I could not never get through that miracle morning without interruption. But yeah, I love everything that you've said is so powerful. So moving from that into more of this hybrid model, walk me through like the creation of the very first one and then even what that looked like. So I'm just gonna let you take it away with your story on how you scaled that, where you saw the need to scale it. You said you had a team that was helping you build this. Just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, if I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, I want to build something similar, give me kind of the step by step or the play by play.
So I will say, I'm going to start. There's two problems that every person who enters the space has. And I solved the problem in one way, and I've helped other people solve the problem this way. I'm going to talk about it, but I want to acknowledge this first. Space is a huge struggle, and there are solutions for that, but finding locations that are cost effective, that are zoned properly, all of that stuff can be an issue. And then the second one is staffing. So, and we worked through those issues, but when this got started, what happened was I was actually at church, and our pastor was like, I'm going to create a school to solve this problem. And he started listing what this school was going to look like. And I was sitting there and I'm like, it's not allowed to be a school. What you want to build is not legally allowed to be a school in
Yeah.
the state that we live in. And I went to him and I was like, I'll just give them some pointers. Right. I was running my other business. My other business was going well. I
Yeah.
had no intention of entering this space. And I went and I met with them, and I was like, okay, gave them some pointers. I was volunteering. And then somewhere along the way, it was like, you know what, guys, if you give me the space, I'll let me do it. I'll take care of it. And so it kind of switched gears. And then I had a location. And we had literally, they gave us 2 rooms, and I hired three teachers. I had 3 teachers, 2 rooms, one that we split in half. That's where we started. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this problem solved for these kids. We also brought in a second vendor to do. So I was only managing 2 days, and then I brought in a vendor for the other 2 days. That is where it all started. I'm like, yeah, I can manage this in my free time. This will be fine. Very quickly, I realized that um, having the additional vendor was not, there was a lot of stuff that happened there, but that was not a good fit, because having these programs be high quality is really crucial. And I think, because the market is exploding right now, there's a lot of people entering without realizing what they're doing. And if you get in there and it's not high quality, parents are there because they want transparency and they want rigor. They want it to be a better quality. And so they pick up on it real fast. And so we had brought this other program in, and I very quickly realized that we were not going anywhere. Like the airplane was not taking off if we were with them. So quite literally over Thanksgiving break, I released them and built a second half of the program. So then we had 2 programs operating, that got built in a week. It was like those kinds of things, because I didn't start out with the business plan. It wasn't until a year in when I was like, okay, I'm making a business plan. No more of this building the airplane while we're flying it. We're actually getting a business plan going, and then went from there. But we started, and I built like I outlined all the curriculum. I wrote the plan. I wrote the home study. So we had 2 days of core curriculum, 3 days of home study, and then we had a 2-day enrichment program, that was based in history with a lot of hands-on activities. Entrepreneurship is a class because me, of course, it had to be. But we did like entrepreneurship through history. So when they were
Wow.
studying, when they're studying the Great Depression, they were studying an inventor and somebody who built businesses out of that, things like that. So we had those 2 programs operating, but I was really just trying to provide like the band-aid to that community that they needed. And then word got out. So I started hosting these events to educate people. I would take a weekend, and I'd open it up and be like, okay, let me tell you what we're doing so you guys can do this. And that turned into, okay, so remember, from October to January, I had maxed out. We were like hanging children from ceilings. Like it was just, and I'm like, we need small classroom sizes. This isn't working.
You
We
have
were
bunk
creeping into,
desks.
I know, right? We were like creeping into every part of the church, just expanding and expanding. And I had over 200 people on the wait list. And this happened in just a couple of months. And so I kind of reorganized at that point and really focused in on training my staff and building out the actual curriculum for the program. And then by the end of the year, we had 400 people on the wait list and we were maxing out. So then that summer, I created a solid business plan, started actually marketing, had an onboarding system for all of my staff, got all of those things up and running. And that I feel like is when we became an official business and took off. There was a lot of trial and error in
Mm,
that first year, but I hope I answered your question. I feel like
yeah.
it was a bumpy start. It was a bumpy start, and it wasn't an intentional start. So as much as I'm talking about intentional, it wasn't. And because of that, there was a lot of figuring out. And then from there, it was like, okay, We need to have a really strong identity for what our curriculum is, who we are, being extremely transparent on values, on academics. I created a system so that the teachers and parents had an open communication portal where they were literally, the teacher at the end of the day was going in there and putting like, this is what we covered. And, Susie for fractions, the pizza thing worked really well. Here's a link. And
Mm.
then mom and dad could write back like, hey, we tried that. It didn't work, but we tried this. So you were really partnering with parents. So really, really just got very clear about what we were doing, how to communicate that, and then partnering with parents and training staff. That was like, I doubled down, tripled down on those areas. And then over time, we even got more clarity around the curriculum and developing a program that was really unique, and started building up the marketing plans, which included a lot of education. A
Yeah.
really like from a place of service, like, hey, we want to help you, we want to bring you in, we want you to feel like you're empowered in your child's education. And then I always held true to things like parents could choose how many days their kids came. We didn't keep
Mm.
attendance, so that parents have that flexibility. And yeah, the kids were taking off. The kids were doing so well, right? We have to make sure we're serving. I think that's another benefit of this is, in the schooling system, you're not really concerned about the end product,
Mhm.
right? It's more about the system functioning and how it looks as a whole. But in this, you have a customer. You
Mhm.
have that little 7-year-old who came to you and was really struggling with reading. Or, there's this one little sweetheart I can think of who was so terribly shy, terrified of her own shadow, like wouldn't even answer a question, like hiding all the time. And she was the 3 years I was there. The last we did a big presentation at the end of every year, so families could see and they could present their work. And she was up there doing a speech and in front of an audience. We have over 300 kids, so there's like 1,200 people in the audience, and she was up there speaking and sharing her ideas and her work. And she was standing up tall. And, because a parent has a choice to be
Mhm.
with you or not be with you, you have to be pouring into your end user, right? You have to be pouring in. You have to look at them as a customer and help them grow and develop. And once that starts happening, if you just keep educating and serving, these things just blow up because people are
Yeah.
so desperate for authentic learning,
Mm.
for care, for relationship building and transparency.
Yeah.
Parents want a partner. They may not be in a position to do it all, but they want to know. They want to be a part of it. They want to make sure that they want to see that growth and development, and they want to see it in everything. They want to see it in academics. They want to see it socially. They want to see it personally. And so we just, we came up against challenges each time and we stayed focused. So my team grew. I started with those 3 teachers. When I exited, I had 52.
Wow.
So there was a lot of skill building and team building and things that had to go along with that as well. And they're all still there. They love being there. So really building that as well. But there's so many little parts. But I would say the most important thing, if you're listening and this is something you're interested in, the very first thing you have to do is to have a very clear perspective on who you want to serve. Who do you want to serve and what do they need?
Mm.
Then you got to pick the direction you're going to go to get there. So let's say, we're talking right now, you want to serve entrepreneurial families where parents are entrepreneurs. They want something very specific from their education. Know who you're going to serve. And then from there, you got to start building out what they need. I think a lot of people start with like the marketing, the way it looks, the name, the graphics. No, you need your curriculum in check. You need to have your culture in check so that whenever you're bringing people in, staff or families, you're bringing in people who are ready to take what you've got and run with it and feel at home there.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. Who is it that you want to serve? What are the families that you want to be in your community? And then build the curriculum around that. The rest comes because parents are already looking.
Mm.
They already know what they want. So you have to get clear, and you don't want to be generic. You know, be like, we're covering math, science, language, and most people aren't looking for that. They want you
Yeah.
to have a clear perspective. They want to know, is one of your values entrepreneurship? Because it was for me what I was building. Financial literacy, entrepreneurship, innovation. Really getting to know great minds. We did a lot. Like I've said before, I love biographies as a learning tool. we had that as a very clear perspective. We also chose a classical model of education. So it was very clear who we were going after, how we were going to serve them. So when that core is great, the rest of it is just logistics. That's just plugging and play systems and templates.
Yeah.
You got to get that core of who you're going to serve and how you're going to serve them.
And that's universal in entrepreneurship and marketing, right? I think
Exactly.
you touched on something that hopefully we say enough on the show is like we shouldn't be starting with developing the logo and the brand colors. It should really be starting on that. And, as
Hmm.
I'm coaching, I'm realizing like that really is where it has to start. Cause I had started writing a book and you have all these things, these pieces, and then it's not trying to overthink or restart. It's literally coming back to the root of like, why am I doing this? Who is this for? What's the problem I'm solving? What's the methodology? And that really is like, I can testify that is the proper order of things. And when you do that, you will have a business. It may not be really
Yes.
fast. It may take a little more effort. And I think I think sometimes we can worry that's busy work with getting into like the market research and the development and everything and whatever. But I do think that's a crucial part. And if you skip that, then you're going to have a harder time. And it will be more building the plane as you go, but you did at least know those strong foundational pieces. And then all the details could kind of come together over time. And I think there was more intentionality than you're giving yourself credit for too, because you saw a need. It was already there. It was just kind of, couldn't see the whole picture yet, but it all
Yeah.
came together because you knew, like you had your values, you had what was important to you as a parent, as an educator. So I think it's amazing. A couple of technical questions for you. If
Yeah.
somebody's listening to this and they want to maybe follow in exactly what you've done, did you set this up as a nonprofit, a for-profit? Like, what is somebody going to be looking at? How much time until they're taking a paycheck from this? Because you say like there's a huge demand for this. I almost look at this as a
Yeah.
franchise opportunity, right? You can do it all
Hmm.
yourself, probably learn from you. What are we talking in terms of? Obviously, we want to serve and fill that need, but is there good income to be made in filling this need specifically?
Yes. Okay. So yes, there is. I would plan. So there is a lot of upfront cost involved. You've got to get curriculum. You have to hire teachers. If you're looking at doing a micro school pod type situation where you start as the first teacher, I have had clients do that. That's a way to cut initial costs. And then build and expand from there. But you are going to have an upfront cost with, location, curriculum, and staff. So really taking a good income from it takes between 6 months and a year, depending on how many enrollees you have and your location. So it's pretty reasonable to expect a six-figure profit or a salary that you can take, but I would gauge that on 6 months to a year and keep in mind market and things like that.
Yeah.
If you're only going to have a 2-day program versus a 4-day program that does alter it. The program that I built was two programs that operated on off days. So we had
Hmm.
families who were enrolled in up to 4 days. We had families enrolled in just one day. So up to 4 days, 6 months to a year, a six-figure profit is reasonable to expect, but there is a good upfront cost involved.
Hmm.
You can also, I recommend my clients, we start with marketing events and things like that so you can get some enrollment under your belt to help with that initial cash flow. Once they've done their curriculum fees and things like that, you can start to go from there. So there's a little bit of it runs like a school cycle. So if anybody knows anything about schooling budgets, they're actually operating with the previous semester's budget most of the time. And that is how these operate as well. So you do have to keep in mind that there's going to be a lag time and an initial startup there. So nonprofit and for profit, mine ran as a subsidiary of the church. So we were nonprofit. So I was I salaried myself out of that. But you can go either direction, and that has a lot to do with the location that you pick and where you're going to be. And it has a lot to do with the regulation in your state.
Hmm.
So there are benefits and drawbacks to both that I go over with people. Right now, there's no universal regulation here. There's not a universal path because every state is so different. Every state's education code is different. And so really you want to weigh the pros and cons about who you're going to serve. Another aspect of this, one of the things that goes into this factoring is if you're going to be faith-based or not. So if you're going to be faith-based, then you're likely not going to be in a position where you can accept any state funds depending on your state, which then it allows you to have more flexibility as far as profit or a nonprofit or for profit.
Mm.
So the kind of branching system to make that decision has to do with a lot of the things in your area, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks for clarifying that.
But you can do it both ways.
Yeah. And then what would you recommend if somebody's hearing this and they're like, okay, I wonder if this is viable in my area? What are some of the things you look at in terms of doing just some very light market research to see if this would even be a fit? Maybe you're a homeschool parent listening to this. Maybe you want your kids in a situation like this. So you're like, I will facilitate. And if I can also have it be a business, great. Like, what should you be really starting to consider to know this would work really well where you are?
Yeah. So the first thing I would do is I would look around and see if there are any co-ops, learning centers, hybrids, or micro schools near you, and just take a peek at them. Are they just getting started? Do you see them growing? Do they have multiple sites? Things like that will give you an idea if the community already is aware of the idea. The second thing that I would do is head into, I know this can be a time suck, but head into those Facebook homeschool groups and ask around on what people are doing. If they have do you guys have any recommendations for drop-off programs? That's a common use of language. Do you guys, are there any places that your kiddos can go 1 or 2 days a week? Are you looking for that? You'll 2 or 3 posts like that in a busy homeschool group will give you a very good idea on if there's something already happening or if people are looking for something like that. I have found a couple of pockets in the market where people are very wary of programs like this if they're coming from the homeschool world. So if you come across that, the next place to look is a school aged group and see if anybody ask questions about, have you guys ever thought of like a smaller private school? Like it's so hard to find things, and see that's the second place to look. The homeschool market, though, the homeschool people are already primed and ready. You'll also find a lot of people in those groups who are considering homeschool, and this is one of their barriers. So when you put a message out like that, asking those questions, you'll start to see kind of what the feel is in your area.
Love that. Really good advice. Really cool business model. Like, I love hearing about the different things that we can do. I mean, maybe you don't have a passion for homeschooling, but maybe you're like, this is something that I definitely see my community needing. There's so many different entry points to this. And I love the exposure. I love your story and what you've done with your extensive background and what you've built. I know there's probably a ton that goes into this. Like, I'm thinking all these logistical things that most people might not consider. So you're the go-to expert. You're the only person I know who's doing this, who's really facilitating creating these micro schools and these different opportunities. So where can people go to learn more about what you do and maybe look into it deeper?
Yeah. Well, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I have some articles coming out there that will help you kind of start discerning these things. I'm also going to be offering to your audience a free class where I actually take you through the framework step by step. I know we talked kind of in big ideas. There's a lot of pieces to it. So I'd be happy to have you join me there as well, so I can help kind of let you see this broken down even more so. There's so much room in this market and there's such a need, and it can be a really fun place. I've even had people who have started things like nature schools by hiring someone and not being the person there on site. So there's a lot of ways to get in here and build something that your family can benefit from too.
Yeah. I would be about that route, probably.
Yeah.
I'm like, I could teach. I love teaching, but do I want to do it all the time? Probably not. But if we could facilitate that, like I said, my kids are in a great place, but I'm
Yeah.
open.
I did not teach at the hybrid. I ran it and
Mhm.
most of the time from home.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely possible.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you so much, Allie. This was so fun. Anything else you want to add to any of our aspiring entrepreneurs? Any words of wisdom before we let you go?
Trust your intuition, and then whatever that says, go at it intentionally
Mm,
and you'll find a win.
I love it. So wonderful, so powerful, so precise, so succinct is what I meant to say. Thanks so much again for your time. It was really fun chatting with you, and I'm sure you and I will continue to talk long after this. But yeah, thanks so much for bringing this to our listeners.
Well, and thank you for having me, and thank you for all you guys do at this podcast. It's a good one.
Thank you.